I think we can start, Sylvia, and then people can join eventually. Okay. Very warm welcome, everybody, to today's seminar. I think we will work 1 hour, 1.5 hour, depending on how many questions there will be and the discussions. We have a very distinguished speaker with us today, Sylvia Schenk, and you saw her biography. And the background to this seminar was that we met first time in Singapore in last December at the World Floorball Championship. I was there as a representative of Ukraine and as an International Floorball Federation CB member. And Sylvia was there as Ethics Commission member. She's the Ethics Commission member of the International Floorball Federation. And she had a very, very passionate, they had actually a very passionate presentation. And I thought I need to get to know her and more about this subject. And this is how we started to talk. And then the idea came up that let's make a seminar. And first it was about, okay, let's make a seminar for people in maybe the floorball community in Ukraine. And then we got the idea, why not make it wider? So other people join. And it's very interesting that so many people actually registered and there's big interest for this. One interesting thing, it's when we had our pre-meeting, we had a discussion a little bit, and Sylvia said, can you explain the Ukrainian sports system? And I was like, well, I thought how to do it in a quick way. So I said, well, you remember GDR? And you were a little bit surprised. GDR, but come on, this is like state sports schools. There is like trade union or state companies that have sports. Well, basically, structurally, Ukraine is still this, even though it's much more freer society than East Germany were then. And I think the positive side is that we had so many people from different federations, from clubs, from government that were interested in this seminar. So let it be a good energy and good start to make changes. Okay, I give you the floor, Sylvia.
Okay, thank you very much, Tamus, for the introduction, and hello to everybody once again, and thank you very much for inviting me. So it's a little bit of an experiment. I have had presentations like that quite a lot, but usually to one single sport organization on the national or the international level. So now it's a mixture, and I'm not very familiar, except for the short explanation by Tamus of the Ukrainian sports system. I try to understand a little bit more of it, but most of the things I will talk about are the same in every kind of organization, whether it's a company, but there you don't talk about good governance, there you talk about compliance systems, but that's more or less the same, just a little bit a different approach depending on the structure. Or whether you talk about sport organizations or a charity organization, or have already advised, for example, Greenpeace Germany on good governance. And it's the approach and the overall view on the issues is always the same. So I think you will have something or take something out of the presentation. I hope so, even if the structure is not fully understood by me. So you can at any time interrupt me and ask questions. I will always be able to come back to the point I was just talking about. As I probably will not see if you raise your hands or there's some people coming in, I just have to admit. I think it would be best, Tamus, if you are a little bit the moderator and that you interrupt me if you see there is a hand or that you write in the chat and Tamus will look into the chat and then tell me, oh, there is a question. Okay?
Of course,
I think
of course.
The best way to organize it. So we have already tried me sharing the screen and I'm going to do it now again. And I hope it works. Can everybody see my first slide?
Yeah.
Okay, so we just start. Yeah. So that's a short overview. We will start because we are in sport with a very short warming up. You don't have to move, just your brain a little bit. Then I will tell you a little bit of a short history of integrity. We are going to talk, if it's good governance, we talk about integrity, the understanding of integrity, and that's a little bit developing over time. And it's important to have this in mind when we start to talk about how to deal with the challenges we face out today. Then I will give you a short overview on what's the architecture of a good governance concept. I hope I can do it in a way that it's very practical for you to understand it. We'll talk about some specific challenges in sports. There it might be that I don't have all the details of the Ukrainian sports system, but then you can tell me. We'll especially talk about conflicts of interests because that's a big issue everywhere in politics, in business, in sport, and wherever. And we will stop with some key elements of good governance. And I hope with that you know a little bit more the details, you can understand the overall approach. That's my goal for today. And maybe then know how and where to start if you want to implement it in your club, in your organization, wherever you are responsible. Okay, so was that a question? No. Warming up, just a short quote from the G20 Leaders Declaration some years ago. They have, in the meantime, several times more or less confirmed it. So politics and other stakeholders from the outside are expecting from sport organizations on the national and international level well, to address integrity and to work against corruption and against misuse of power. And what we are going to talk about now is looking a little bit more in these developments and what one can do. So just read this briefly, and then somebody may tell me what's the problem, or is it something you know from your experience? It's very common, things like that in German sport, and probably you have similar situations in Ukraine too. I see Alexander nodding, so that's something you have already experienced similar in sport or in another area? Okay. So what's the problem? What would you do? What should Paul, what should Coach Colin, what should the parents, what should the president of the club to do? Or shall they just say, oh, it's like that, we will not touch? Any idea? Thomas?
That's a difficult question. Well, yeah. I think in many times what people are actually doing, they don't do much, and the talk is starting behind the back about how.
Well, if no, Woloda, is it a no? Nobody wants to say something. Okay, so this can be a very bad situation. It can be bad for Paul because his teammates will say, "Oh, you are just playing because your parents are paying money." It's bad for the coach because for his authority, yeah, he is only looking for the money and not for the best players. And so it can be bad for everybody and for the entire team and the club. So things like that in Germany are happening in every second club or every second team, more or less. Yeah? And what we try now to tell people, talk about it. Talk to the parents and say, wonderful that you are sponsoring the team, but for the team and for your son, it would not be helpful if now the coach feels obliged to all the time let Paul play. It's not good for Paul. It's not good for the parents because it gives a totally wrong impression. And then the coach can explain to the team, of course, Paul from time to time has to play. I will always say why he plays, but I will decide it in a very objective way. And if you have doubts, please tell me. The more open you deal with such a situation, the better. You will not avoid these situations. You don't want to tell the parents, oh, we don't want your money. It's fine. Parents usually sponsor the team of their son and not another team, I should say. So it's a good situation, but you have to talk about it, and that will be better for everybody. And if the parents don't understand and say, no, we want that our son is always playing because we give money, well, then I would say better don't have such sponsors. It's not good for sport. It will undermine everything. Okay, that's just for the beginning to think a little bit about specific situation. And I have another one. So what do you think of this situation? And what should Graham do? Should he do something, or should he just go away? He's just a greenkeeper.
Well, I mean, it's healthy if there is a reaction to this. But maybe, I don't know, if to talk directly to Charles or to talk to somebody else in the club or in the team.
Yeah, at least I think he should not just say, oh, I'm just a greenkeeper. It's not my responsibility. I don't care. That would be wrong, because it can be that there's a big problem behind it. We have a lot of cases in Germany and all over the world of sexual harassment, sexual abuse in sports. So it's very important that there are two people waiting. Just a moment. Can you admit them?
I think, Sylvia, you have the authority to do.
But it doesn't show admit. It just says invite. Nee. Copy link. Nee. I don't know what that means now. Admit all. Okay. I think now I have the right. Are they coming? Two people?
They are.
Okay.
They are here. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't find the right click. Back to the case. So it's very important that if somebody observes, and whoever, even if the greenkeeper, a neighbor or whatever, something that looks a little bit crazy, then better talk to a person you trust and say, well, have a look onto it. Might be there is a problem. And that's something that usually doesn't happen. Many people don't want to talk about it. It's not, they don't like it. What am I doing? And then problems can grow. And so what we will talk about during this hour now is also about how to deal with such a situation, and how to try to deal with problems at the very beginning and not wait until they have grown, because that's bad for the person, for Patricia, for example, in this example, and that can be very bad for the sports club or organization and for the entire sport. So deal as open as possible with situations like that. If you don't know what to do, ask someone you trust. And in Germany, we are just building up a system where we have people a little bit specialized, at least in each sport organization, and if possible in each bigger club, who can be approached if something like that happens. So that they then know what to do, how to help Patricia, how to protect the child if something is happening, and how to deal with the situation in the right way. So that's something that's very, very important to keep in mind. We are not just talking about anti-corruption, we are talking about different kind of misuse of power. And we will see it a little bit more in detail now when I start to talk about the history of integrity. And once again, for the new ones, whenever you have a question, Tamus will take it up, write it in the chat, or raise your hand. I cannot see it, or only some of you, but Tamus will then interrupt me and put the questions at once. So that's not a problem. I don't mind to discuss in between, okay? So that's the next slide. I always name corruption the hidden crime, because if you don't look into it, then you will have no cases. It's like doping. If you don't have any doping control, you will not see any doping case. Oh, that's wonderful. We have no cases, huh? But everybody takes dope. That was in cycling 20 years ago. Or there's the next one coming. Just a minute. I always have to admit them. So it's again, it's the same with corruption. If you don't look into it, it can take years before by accident you know, oh, there has been corruption in this case or in that. And the very specific problem with corruption, then even to later to prove it, you always have two perpetrators. Bank robbery you can do on your own or with two people or three or four. It doesn't matter. It's bank robbery or any other crime. But corruption, you need a bribe payer and a bribe taker. And usually they come from very different spheres. So when we had the big FIFA scandals 10 years ago or 8 years ago, I think you all remember, there was, well, headlines all over the world. FIFA and football is so corrupt. Yeah, but part of this corruption were American, US companies, because many of the FIFA officials who have been investigated and later convicted of bribery, they took bribes from, for example, US agencies for TV rights and others. So it was not just FIFA and football officials corrupt, there was another side. But having these different types of perpetrators to get working together, coming from different spheres, one from the US business and one from FIFA, usually makes it very difficult to investigate and prove there is corruption and to see it. And the next point with corruption is you don't have an obvious victim and an obvious damage. You don't see it directly. If somebody takes away your car, you will cry. Or if there's a bank robbery, the next day the bank will say, oh, we have been robbed. But corruption can be hidden for years before it can be detected, or before, or maybe never it comes to like with doping. And for a long time, many people saw, because you don't see an obvious victim, you don't see the obvious damage, oh, it doesn't matter. Yeah, they didn't see which harm was done. They all thought it's a peccadillo. It's not a real crime. It's nothing we have to care about. And that, of course, helped to not to look into details of corruption, and so corruption could grow in many countries and in many sport organizations and in many other areas of society all over the world. And the last point that's special about corruption, usually it's quite a slow development. The person who is corrupted, the bribe taker, the person who gets the bribe, doesn't stands up in the morning and says, oh, today I want to take a bribe. But usually, step by step, the bribe payer starts to build up a relationship with the bribe taker. And then step by step, inviting him a little bit, talking to him, trying to build up trust, and then starts to say, well, I would like, can you please do me a favor? And then all of a sudden, you are in a real corruption situation. So that's why corruption is a crime that you need to work a lot on prevention. Prosecutors in Germany specialized on corruption say, well, it's 10 to 15% repression and investigation and sanctioning to fight corruption, but the rest, 85%, is prevention. And that's what's all about when we talk about good governance or compliance. I just continue, and please, once again, raise your hand if you have any questions, if it's going too fast or whatever. So the definition of corruption used by Transparency International and nowadays used more or less all over the world is abuse of entrusted power for personal gain. It's all kind of misuse of power. It's not just about receiving money. It can be receiving investigations, receiving an honor, for example, a doctor title from a university. That can be a bribe, or it can be sextortion, how we call it. The case we had just with Coach Colin and Patricia. Was it Colin? Coach Charles and Patricia. It can be using your superior situation to let, for example, a young athlete have sex with you. And that happens quite often. We had cases in football, in Haiti, and in Afghanistan, where the president of the Football Federation told the girls of the national team, if you want to stay in the team, if you want to be in the academy and be trained for national for international tournaments, then you have to come to my room one night. And that worked. So we have situations like that all over the world, and that has to do with misuse of power within an official function. So, and what's important too, it's not just about breaching criminal laws, but integrity is more than just not being a criminal. Yeah, so it's about really not doing any harm, even it's not a crime. There are conflicts of interest. We will go more into details of that later, and many other steps until really committing a crime. But you have, if you talk about prevention, also start to deal with the steps before it becomes a criminal behavior. And for all this, prevention is really key in fighting corruption and in prevailing the integrity of a sport organization and or a company or whatever. Any questions? Vamos?
Well, I think this is very... Сергей, microphone. Well, I think this is so fascinating because this is about, you know, as you said, prevention. Because often we see the problem when they arise, when they come, and then it's like you have to take huge actions, and they are very tough, and they damage the organization, and but it's really fascinating that prevention is the key.
Yeah,
because I didn't see, before you said it, when we talked, I didn't see it that way. I saw it more like that, okay, you try to be a good organization, and if you have bad things, then you have to make some really tough actions. But what you say is that it has to, you know, you can do a lot to prevent the bad things.
Yeah. And we will go more into detail for that, because good governance is an approach how you build up a strong structure to prevent misbehavior, or all kinds of misbehavior. Okay, so a little bit more into history. I had told you about the hidden and very specific crime of corruption, and for decades, people all over the world really didn't care for it. In Germany, in Great Britain, in the US, everywhere. So it's not a specific problem by specific countries, but nobody really took it serious. And at the end of the 80s and beginning of the 90s, two things happened. Two very important historical things happened that made people start to think different on the international level. One was the Sub-Sahara crisis, and especially people from the World Bank trying to deal with it and to help the people over there starving and having big problems. And they saw, if we don't fight corruption, then we can bring money and goods to these countries that will help a little bit, but that will not change everything. We can continue like that for hundreds of years. It will not really change the situation, because by corruption, much of the money, many of the goods are taken away before they reach the people who need it, and the countries are not able to live on their own because they have a corrupt situation and are totally unstable and not really helping their own people. And the second point that happened, and that you are all aware of, was the end of the Cold War. many Western companies saying, oh, now we want to go to Russia, to the Gulf states, to all the states now newly coming in their independence. And then they realized there is quite a lot of corruption. And if we want to have an investment, and when we want to have our investment to be safe, and if something happened, we want to have the right courts where we can go and fight for our money and for our rights, then we have to do something against corruption. So in the 90s, and that's not so long ago, that's 30 years ago, in the 90s, it started on the international level that people said, we have to do more about corruption. We have to put it onto the agenda. And that is when Transparency International as an NGO was founded in 1993. And the first aim was bring corruption onto the international agenda because it was no topic there. And the founders were men working for the World Bank, and they had the experience of the Sub-Sahara crisis, and they now saw, oh, we want to do something in Eastern Europe, and we have the problems and the challenges with corruption. And so the second step then was having it on the agenda and develop instruments, laws, conventions, and so on, and start to work on prevention, because it's a crime, and that was already clear at that time, where you have to have specific instruments, specific tools to try to prevent it, or if something happened, to detect it as early as possible and to stop it immediately and not let it grow, because it grows like a, what do you call it? No, it grows everywhere. Yeah, if you don't stop it, corruption will be all over the country or all over the organization, because it's infecting everybody.
Maybe like cancer, right?
Yeah, that's the right word. Thank you. So in 1997, the OECD convention, the OECD approved a convention against corruption with one main point, that was to make foreign bribery a crime. Foreign bribery is when a German company gives money to a minister or to a high public official in another country to receive a contract, for example, for 20 lorries or 50 buses going to Daimler, and then have a big contract with a foreign ministry. Up to that time in 1997, and I think nearly all Western countries who always say we are not so corrupt, others are corrupt, but that's never true. All are more or less corrupt. In the Western countries, in Germany, and we will go more into detail in the next slide, people didn't care for foreign bribery. It wasn't a crime. And then in 2003, the UN made a convention against corruption as well. And then there were specific regional conventions and so on. I don't list them all here, just that you know, it's quite a new development. And if people say, oh, FIFA was so corrupt in the 90s, everybody was corrupt in the 90s, not just sport, not just FIFA. Yeah? So just keep that in mind. We are still working worldwide on changing the overall situation. And so now the impact on Germany, and I already talked about foreign bribery and the OECD convention. Until the end of 1996, German companies could have a tax deduction if they paid a bribe to a foreign minister. And then, because there was the OECD convention, from January 1998 on, only within 2 years, this became a crime. So the perception of what is corruption, it's something you can deduct from your taxes, to it's a crime, that happens, a shift in a very, very short moment. And just to give you an impression, what cultural change, what change of thinking and perception was behind this. And it's all only less than 30 years ago. And the same, then there were situations regarding bringing it a little bit closer to sport with hospitality, so tickets for important matches. We had a big discussion in Germany just before the FIFA World Cup 2006. That was when I just started to work with Transparency International. All of a sudden people realized, so why are politicians invited to the matches? Is that okay, or can that be bribery? And we had then the same with cultural events, Salzburger Festspiele. So in Salzburg, the big music festival, they had discussions on that. And since then, you have to have much more regulations if you invite somebody to a football match or to a concert or whatever. So that's all less than 20 years ago that all these discussions started. And we already talked about sexual harassment with one example in the beginning. And for years, nobody cared for situations like that. And then we had, I think it started to 17 to 18 with the Me Too movement in the US. All of a sudden, things that were normal some years ago, the kiss of Mr. Rubiales at the victory ceremony of the Women's World Cup last year in Australia, 10 years ago, nobody would have said anything. Now he is gone. It was a big scandal. So you see, there have been fundamental changes all over the world within very short time regarding the perception, what's okay and what's not okay. What do we accept and what is a scandal? And so that's nothing just aiming at sport or aiming at one country, but it's an overall development, and everybody has to deal with it and find the answers. So what was behind the thinking in the 90s when people start to work on corruption? I already told you that companies would have to have their investment in foreign countries safe. They want to have a real impact, and not that 80% of the development aid goes into the wrong pockets and not reaches the poorest people that should be supported. And then if you have a lot of corruption in a country, in a region, you have an unstable state. The economy will stay weak, and you will not really help people. You have countries that are very rich regarding their resources, a lot of oil or a lot of agricultural good soil and so on. And quite often these countries, Nigeria, Angola, for example, have the poorest population, because there's rich elites that take away the money, and the people don't get what they should get from the rich, from the resources of their own country. And there are poor countries with not so much resources. There you have less corruption, because what will you corrupt people for if there are no resources? So that's something people saw and learned and realized in the 90s. And then that was a big issue for the US, especially after 9/11 in 2001. For terrorists, for their logistics and for organized crime, it's very good to have a corrupt country where they can, without any noise, make their business, buy pilot licenses and so on, whatever they need. So that was a specific reason for the US to fight corruption, because corrupt countries support organized crime and terrorists. And then, of course, when you have a corrupt country, a corrupt legal system, then even you can fight against climate change, you can fight against environment issues. Corruption can undermine everything. So people realized in the 90s, and are still, some people still are starting to realize, it's not a peccadillo. It's a big issue, and we have to do more worldwide against corruption, and that includes sport. So we have to realize the expectations have changed in the last 20-25 years. Not just on corruption, but as well, people want to be better informed and to have a say, to know, why is this politician doing that? Why is this organization and that company doing that? We have a lot of international NGOs working on specific topics like environment situation, human rights and others, making claims against big companies or against sport organizations. And so one has to deal with it. Regarding sport specifically, sponsors and governments, I had the quote in the beginning of the G20 leadership. They set conditions and they say, well, we want our sport organization in our country to adhere to specific governance rules to really be transparent and so on. And of course, that's from expectations from the outside. From those who are responsible, it's so important that you protect your own people, those who can be victims of, for example, sexual harassment, but also those who are in the leadership. If you have a good prevention program in place, then your people know, your officials, how to deal with the situation, what they should do, or whom they can ask for advice when they have a situation where they don't really know, shall I do it like this or like that? So it's important to protect yourself, to protect your colleagues on your board and all the people who are responsible in your sport organization, and to protect the reputation of your club, of your organization, of your sport. Nowadays, when something happens, you have the communication within your country worldwide immediately with the internet. It's more and more difficult to hide anything, yeah, even if you try. So that's something you should be aware of. And your reputation and the good image of sport is that what sport sells. That's why sponsors and governments are supporting sport. So it's even more important that you protect the reputation of your organization and your sport. And sport is about fair play. And I think many people, or maybe most people, or all people, when they start to engage themselves in sport and with sport, they want to have a fair sport. And so it's so important to bring the right rules in place, the right structure to help people to behave in a way that we really have fair sport and that we have a good governed sport. So if you don't have any questions to that, I would go a little bit more into the architecture of good governance. Is this okay? Or anything still open, anything to ask? Okay, then I continue. I will start with a little bit of confusion. You don't have to look onto all of this. Tamus has the presentation as a PDF, so he can send it to you afterwards. These are just words that have to do with sustainability, with human rights, with everything. But I will make it easier and have a little bit less confusion. So you see, I took away quite many of the words, left only 6. And now I will give you an explanation how you can imagine, how you can see the architecture of good governance. And we will only use these 6 words. So that's now structure. We start with the overall approach. That is good governance. You want to govern your sport organization in a good, and open, and fair way. And then you need some principles. First of one is democracy. So you have your members or your employees, and they should have a say. You cannot just govern one president from above and he tells or she tells everybody what has to happen. That nowadays doesn't work any longer. A good governed organization, people who are working in it, who are members, they have a say as well. You need democracy and clear rules for how it works. Then
Sylvia, can
yeah.
I ask just a stupid question? Why not? Why not having one guy that decides everything? Why is that model bad?
Well, first of all, one guy usually knows everything. And there are a lot of studies in the last 10, 20, or even more years nowadays that say if you have a diverse group of people deciding, then you have diverse views onto the problem. And then each decision will be better because you have taken into account many views and many perspectives and many arguments. And then, of course, if you have it have a decision made in a clear decision-making way. Everybody knows which body has to decide, who can have a say in it, then your decisions will be better accepted. If one person, of course, you have situations, and we have one horrible situation in one Olympic sport in Germany, a smaller one, I don't tell you in detail. It's dominated by people from the former GDR with thinking from former GDR, to be honest. And there, the president has more or less bought the entire federation because he has a lot of money, and he gave a lot of money, and he brought some sponsors, and whatever he does, he decides, and nobody has to say something. And it's a toxic situation. People are afraid to say anything. Athletes are afraid because they think, if I do something and the others don't dare to do something, then I'm the one who will be kicked out. And so, okay, that can work for some time, but it never works forever. And in my view, I think even this federation, if you look into it, it would have better athletes with a better atmosphere and with a better decision-making situation. But again, for some years, it may work with a dictator at the head, but historical experience, not just in sport, but overall in politics as well, it never lasts forever. Okay, so democracy, then it's very important to have transparency, to make clear what's the mission of our club, what's the budget, what's the structure, and so on, so that people can see how does it work, and so on, who is responsible for what. That's transparency. That's why we call ourselves in our NGO Transparency International. We don't call us anti-corruption or anti-misuse of power, but we named it positively. Transparency is so important. Be open. And then the third principle is accountability. It must be clear who is responsible for which decision, who reports to whom, and who will hold accountable after a decision. Yeah, if you mingle it all and nobody knows who has a decision and nobody takes over responsibility, then you don't know how to deal with the situation. When I was in the International Cycling Union in the management committee, our president at that time, that was in 2000, from 2000 to 2005, he told me once, it's nice to discuss with you, Sylvia, but in the end, I want you to always vote with yes. And I was very astonished. And I said, okay, when you convince me in the discussion we have, then I will vote with yes in the end. But if I'm not convinced, then I will vote with no. And what's the problem? And he said, no, I will never accept a dissenting vote. And then I realized in this discussion and his behavior afterwards, because I was then, well, an outlaw more or less, because I still had a dissenting vote from time to time. But then I realized if it's always by force that all say yes to a decision, then nobody is really responsible, because then it looks like there was no other possibility. If everybody says yes, if it's an unanimous decision, so what would have been the alternative? Yeah, so then you hide yourself beside, or everybody said yes, so it's fine. Big majority. It's much better to have a discussion. It's much better to have 2 or 3 dissenting votes to discuss and see, okay, there are more arguments, and yeah, and then go out and say, well, we have discussed all the arguments, but with the majority, we have taken this decision, and these are the reasons for it. Okay? And that's closely linked to what I have just told you. Very important is participation. Stakeholders, your members, your employees, but as well the neighbors of the sport organizations or the sponsor and so on, the public, wherever you have to deal with, or the parents of your young members and so on. They have to be involved as far as they are concerned and know what you are up to, what is the decision, Why do you take the decision? Ask in advance. It will help you to have better decisions. It will help you to convince people, and then everybody will support finally the decisions. And so that's the overall structure and approach. And to make sure that it works like that, so you then have compliance. Compliance means establish a system that people stick to the rules, that people stick to what they should, and don't have misbehavior. Okay? Understood? So now we will take an example, and Tamus, I hope it is okay. I didn't take floorball as an example, but I stick to football because I think it's more people know football than floorball.
How could you? How could you, Sylvia?
Yeah, sorry,
I'm joking.
but I think it will work with floorball as well. I once made a presentation at the German Swimming Federation, and then I took water polo, and they confirmed, yes, it works with water polo as well. So, but now we have here football. So if you look, and that's an example of how you build up a good governance system. If you want to have a good football match, you first of all need the overall structure, the pitch, ball, and goals, yeah, how big, and so on. And you need the basic rules that define the game, how to play football. Don't play handball, don't play volleyball, but play football. But even if you have that, and you have the 11 players here and 11 players there, everything, and say, okay, you have the rules, you have the overall structure, now play. Then perhaps you know what will happen. If they are very competitive, each team wants to win, and after a short time, it will no longer be football. It will be wrestling, or start with rugby and end with wrestling or boxing or whatever. So beside this overall structure and the overall rules defining the match, the game, you need as well rules how to behave in the right way. Yeah, don't tear at the jersey, don't have a very high leg, and things like that. So then you have to prevent misbehavior during the match. You have specific rules, and it's depending on which sport you have. So in football, you have specific rules, and I think in floorball, I must admit, I don't know all the details of floorball, but maybe there are some rules different, what you can do with your, how do you call it, this,
with the stick.
Yeah, with the stick, because that you don't have in football. Yeah? So you look, what are the specific risks I have in my specific sport, what kind of misbehavior can happen. Then you make specific rules, you inform the players about the rules, you educate them. Yes, you have to do this or that, and you don't have to do other things, what you shouldn't. And even then, if they all know the rules, if it's very strong competition, then people, and that's human, that's human everywhere, people try to go as fast as possible and maybe break the rules. That's normal. And the more competitive, the more competition you have, the more people try to extend the rules or even break the rules. And therefore, you need some sort of control. And in football, you have a referee. And the referee looks that they really stick to the rules and not any misbehavior, any foul is happening. And what is very important, if something is happening, the referee has a whistle and has a yellow and a red card. And I think you all know when the referee from the very beginning doesn't make clear that he is controlling the match, that he takes the whistle whenever something is happening that shouldn't, then after 10-15 minutes, he will not be able anymore to really lead the match. Because if the players see, oh, the referee doesn't care, I have done this and that, and he didn't say anything, he didn't even take the whistle, then the referee will not be able to lead the match in a way that is really a fair match. That's a very important point for all good governance or compliance programs as well. You have to address every misbehavior. That doesn't mean if something is happening, a little bit of a foul, a little bit of tearing at the jersey, that you immediately take the red card. That's not the case. But take the whistle or just tell the player, hey, that's not what we want. We want to have a fair football match, or we want to have good governance in our sport organization. So please stick to the rules. And that's very important. So the referee himself has to make clear there is zero tolerance against misbehavior, not a big sanction for a little misbehavior. That's not the case again, but zero tolerance, address every misbehavior. And then of course, the referee himself, he must lead by example. It's not okay if he is discriminating, if he is shouting, and if he is using bad words. Yeah, then the players will do the same. That's what we need to have a good and well-led football match. And that's transferred to an organization is the same for good governance, for a compliance program. You need the structure of an organization. You need the right statutes in place.
Він реально сказав, блін, це дуже важко, типу, нашим федераціям змінити свідомість, суто ментальна історія, щоб її, типу, переключити, щоб вони почали, типу, в своїй практиці, в своїх організаціях дотримуватись цих принципів. Тобто це було важко. І в першу чергу, що це було важко саме на рівні типу, свідомості. Змінити от свідомість керівників організацій, дотримуватись цих всіх речей. Вони десь через там 10 років ввели якісь там мінімальні стандарти типу, для спортивних федерацій, ну ті, які, мабуть, входять типу, до НОКу, олімпійські в першу чергу, які вони мають дотримуватися і теж там почали використовувати ці принципи для отримання грошей. Типу. Оце от головне, як його імплементувати, типу, як за цим слідкувати і як так, щоб воно працювало. Ми ж прекрасно розуміємо, що в наших організаціях, ну, в багатьох федераціях, ну, з цим бідоська.
Ну і взагалі дуже важко змінити культуру, якщо вона сформувалася в організації. Що наша організація, ми отак це робимо, ми отак вирішуємо питання.
Ну,
а потім, якщо
і кажуть, що це працює. Чому ви на нас, типа, на це нарікаєте? Воно працює, це подивіться.
Hi, sorry, that's a German. That's a German internet. we are face some problems. So I start sharing again.
Yeah,
I need
I'll give you a sorry to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Sylvia, it was actually not bad. We had a little bit discussion about,
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I drink some water. Okay, so there it is. Share. Huh? It doesn't. Now you should see it. So there we were. Okay. Do you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So any question, or shall I just continue? Okay. So I continue and you can ask after. Oh, Tamus, do you have a question? No.
No, I think it's better that you continue and then we can take the discussion and questions.
Okay, fine. So again, that's the overall part of governance. I can't go into details there now, because that's about, if I always start a governance advice for a consultation for sport organization by looking into the statutes and say, well, your statutes are fit for purpose or they are not. Mostly they are not on the national and international level. So that has something to do with the overall governance of sport, and just some points to this. oh, warte mal. Yeah, okay. Quite often, the structure and the statutes of a sport organization are not fit for purpose. Whether it's FIFA on the big scale, on the international level, or on a smaller scale, what happened and how sport developed the last 30 years with private TV money coming in, more and more sponsoring, and so on. The sport organizations were not prepared to become a multi-billion business. Yeah? FIFA is earning a lot of money, IOC and other sport organizations as well. And the structure was still 100 years old, like a small private club. So you have this situation on the international level and as well on the national and on the club level. And that's one part of the problem. And so,
Sylvia, can I jump in? Just regarding statutes, isn't it the way that statutes they address past problems or past, it's always that they are. You write the statutes because you have this kind of situation today, and then in 10 years you have a different kind of situation. So you're always like lacking behind because you try to regulate the things that were in the past.
Yeah, well, usually you make statutes at the beginning. If a new club is founded, then the club needs statutes. Otherwise, you will not have, at least in Germany, you will not have a club.
Yes.
And we have a law that says what's the minimum that you have to regulate. Who is the president? How is he elected? And things like that. And the bigger the club is and the bigger the volume of money and so on, the more detailed you need the statutes, of course. Yeah? You need a very sophisticated financial reporting when you have $4 billion a year like FIFA. Yeah, so that's a difference to a small club with 50,000 euro a year. Oh, with nearly
what
no
I meant.
Yeah, so yes, the statutes have to develop if your club or sport organization is developing, but the overall structure, what's the decision-making process? Who is controlling whom? What are dates? How long it takes from the invitation for the membership meeting until the membership meeting and so on. So that's something, the overall structure that you have to have right in every kind of organization, in a company, in a club, and everywhere. And already there we have a lot of deficiencies in sport in every country. Yeah, I don't know in detail from Ukraine, but in Germany, I have insights in quite many even bigger sport organizations. They have started to work on it now. The last 10 years, there has been a lot of development in Germany. 10 years ago, it was, even with the German Football Federation and other big federations, they had a lot of problems with their structure. So they have started to work on it, but you still have a lot of things to improve. So that's something you have to know when you start to think about governance in sport. You have to have the right structure, the right statutes. Then, at least in our kind of sport system, and partly on the international level as well, it's not like in a company. You have always paid staff and you have a clear shareholder meeting and you have a supervisory board and the management board, but you have elected people and you have many volunteers. So in IFF, the International Floorball Federation, our ethics committee, we are volunteers. And I think the board, more or less, I don't know, Tamus, whether you are well paid for being a member of the central board of the IFF. I think no. Yeah, so there are some staff members, but they have a lot of work too. They have too much work for too little number of staff members, and then you have volunteer people serving on the board. And of course, that's a different structure to having in a company paid board members. Yeah, so that's another layer of risk you have in a sport organization if you look onto the overall situation and the overall governance structure. And then many people in sport come with a very idealistic approach. Our sport is good. We are doing something for the youth. We are doing something for our sport, for our country. And I have quite often observed that people in leading positions in German sport clubs, and for example, my own club, Eintracht Frankfurt, First League Football, they did something in their sport function that they would have never done in their professional life, because it was for the sport, it was for the club. And then they said, oh, tax evasion, oh, a little bit can be helpful for the sport. Well, that's crazy. That's not good for the sport. But things like that happen. And so that's another layer of risk. Yeah, people are thinking, oh, we are doing it for the good. We are doing it for the youth. Sport is something good. But even then, you need to pay your taxes. You need to stick to the rules. And some people, because they are so much engaged and so idealistic, they forget about it. And that is something one has to keep in mind. Then you have the situation, I call it misunderstand loyalty. Mr. Blatter at FIFA, he always talked about we are the football family. We are all friends. Yes, it's good. It's wonderful when you are all friends in Ukrainian sports, in your specific sport organization. But even if you are friends, you need check and balances, you need controls, you need the right rules, and you need to apply the rules. And not say, okay, he's my friend, he will do good. I don't need to look into it. That's not helpful for your friends. That's not helpful for you. That's not helpful for the sport. Nowadays, things like that cannot be accepted and will not be accepted. If something goes wrong, then everybody, well, stands there and say, oh, we did all wrong. So loyalty doesn't mean you don't look onto the problems. You don't tell your friend, oh, you shouldn't do it like that. Yeah, that's quite important. And we have very often only little transparency and little or no real accountability. So one of the two of the three principles I talked about when we looked onto the overall structure. So that's regarding the overall governance and approach in sport. These are some of the challenges. And what is missing most is what I call a speak up culture. I said in the very beginning, when we saw the first example with the coach and Paul, his parents being the sponsors, talk about the situation, make it transparent, and if somebody has concerns, talk about it. That's so important. And now I asked Tamus in advance whether you know Hans Christian Andersen. He's from Denmark, and 200 years ago, something like that. And he collected fairy tales. And my favorite fairy tale is The Emperor's New Clothes. I don't know whether all of you know it. I will just briefly explain. It's an emperor, and two persons come to the court and say, well, Mr. Your Excellence, we have wonderful fabric, we have wonderful clothes, and we will make for you a wonderful uniform. And they look so bright, most people can't see it because it's so bright. Only people who are very intelligent can really see it. And it's so light. Most people cannot feel it. It will be wonderful for you to have such a uniform. The emperor doesn't see anything, but he doesn't dare to admit that he doesn't see anything. And his staff standing around, they don't see anything, but they don't dare to say anything. And so the two tailors, they start and they do like they are preparing a wonderful uniform for him and say, oh, yes, it fits, or there we have to change a little bit. And all the time, nobody said anything, but everybody had doubts. And I don't see anything, but I will not say anything. So everybody was quiet. And then there came the day of the great parade. And all the people already knew, there will be a wonderful uniform our emperor is going to present. We are all very curious to see it. And people are standing down the streets, and the emperor is walking there. He's not wearing anything except for his underwear. And people are starting to say, well, I'm not sure, I don't see anything, and I can't see it. Nobody really says something. And then there is a child. And the child just shouts, oh, he doesn't have anything. He's naked, more or less. And then everybody says, oh, yes, that's right. There are no clothes. There is no uniform. And so I think that's a very good example to think of. It's shameful, it's painful for the emperor, for all the people around him, for the entire country, because nobody in the very beginning said something. And so if you are the emperor, if you are the leader, if you are the president or whatever, if you are in a leading position, encourage your people. If you have doubts, if you think I'm doing the wrong thing, if you think the decision is not well reasoned, if you think we have to think about some more arguments, tell me. And if you are not the leader, but if you are one of the staff members and you have doubts, say them, because you help the emperor. Do you understand what I want to make clear? And that's something that's quite often in sport missing. People say, oh, I better say nothing. I already mentioned it some slides ago. And it's so important. And that's why I like to always talk about this fairy tale, because it makes it very obvious how important it is from the very beginning. If you have doubts, if anything is wrong in your perspective, say it. It can only be helpful. Okay? So please keep Hans Christian Andersen and his fairy tale in mind. So continuing with challenges in sport organizations usually are relatively small for what they are doing and for the public perception. Everybody expects everything from the IOC and from FIFA. And if you look how many staff members they have, they are very, very small. More or less 500 people within IOC, within FIFA. They cannot have a big compliance department. Daimler AG, or it's now Mercedes-Benz AG, they have 20 people working in the compliance department, or even more. One in each country where they produce. But that's something FIFA cannot afford. They are very small compared to the public perception. And they often, in smaller sports federations, smaller sports, they lack staff. We have it in IFF, in the International Floorball Federation. I think they could do with 2-3 people more in the headquarters, but they don't have it. Very engaged, very highly motivated people, but not enough. And lack of financial resources, and that, of course, is a challenge if you look onto the overall governance and how to prevent misbehavior. And you have a very complicated structure. If you have a big company, like, for example, Siemens AG is a big German company with about 400,000 employees all over the world. They had a big corruption scandal coming to light in 2006, 2007. And afterwards, they started to build up a compliance department. And they made rules, and they said in every contract with every employee, we want to have a specific clause on anti-corruption and so on. And we want to have everybody to go to education, to have a seminar on anti-corruption prevention and so on. And so they developed the program, and then in 20 different languages, and they rolled it out in 100 countries. FIFA can't do that. FIFA can't, and the International Floorball Federation can't do it. I cannot say, okay, International Floorball Federation, make a decision, and then every national floorball federation has to apply it. These are entities of their own. They have to approve it on their own. So it's not so easy. We don't have a top-down structure like in Siemens AG worldwide, but FIFA board or the floorball board is elected by the national federations and by the national members. So that makes it difficult to have reforms on the international level. It doesn't make it impossible. We will start now with floorball, and that's first little step now to have education and to offer to the national federations. IOC is doing the same for NOCs and FIFA for national member federations to offer education, to offer workshops like this one, but it takes time. It's easier if you have a centralized headquarter worldwide and they can decide everything.
Sylvia, just a question that you can take, not now, but later, but not to forget it, because we had also now a discussion about what can what can states do? Because states give a lot of money to sport. What kind of good governance requirements could either state or the I don't know, NOC or like sports confederation give to national federations? And maybe you have examples from different countries.
Yeah, I think it might make sense to answer directly. Okay.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
for sport, for the governments, they can give the governmental money, and it's taxpayer money. Yeah, and taxpayers expect from sport federations to deal in the right way with taxpayers' money. They can make conditions and say you have to have a good compliance program in place. For example, UK sport in Great Britain, they started already before the Olympics in London to make develop a governance or compliance program for sport organizations. And then they said whoever wants to get funding has to fulfill a minimum standard in the first year. And then in the second year, because you have to develop it step by step. If you have to change the statutes, usually it takes 2 years. So you cannot expect from every organization from the very first day to have everything in place, but to make it step by step. And the organizations who don't do it, they will not receive money, or they will receive less money. And we have the same situation or the same discussion now in German sports. We are just reforming how the German ministry supports elite sport. And there they will have good governance criteria for the future, and only federations who fulfill these governance criteria will receive money. Or if not, they will receive at least less money. It's not so easy, but you can step by step develop it. And that's something UNESCO, for example, who are the operator, or I don't know how you call it, there is MINEP, the International Minister of Sports conference, every 4 or 5 years. MINEP is organized by UNESCO. So all the sports ministers of the world coming together. Last one, I think one was in Berlin was 2013, and then it was Kazan, and the last one, I think, in Azerbaijan. So they have developed examples for sport ministries, how conditions can be made for public funding. And so that's discussion now starting, and we have now starting the discussion on the regional level in Germany, for example, and then I think many cities will follow to as well say we need a minimum standard of governance in a sport club before they will get money from the city. So that's possible, and sponsors can do the same, and they already do the same in many cases. And the first issue was that it's nearly 15 years ago now that I as a lawyer, I have to negotiate a sponsoring contract with a clear anti-doping clause. Not just as athlete who is convicted of doping will be kicked out. Okay, that's easy. But as well saying, we expect you to have information on anti-doping, a prevention program on doping in place, and things like that. So sponsors are aware that there is a risk when they are sponsoring and something is happening. And so by sponsors, by governments, more and more sport organizations are obliged, if they want to have money, if they want to have more money, to follow governance.
And Sylvia,
Alexander, yes?
Sylvia, what do you think? This approach will work to implement good government principle? Because I know about Dutch Olympic Committee, it had a best practice maybe in good governance implementation. After 10 years, Dutch Olympic Committee said that it is very difficult to implement good governance in the activities of organization because it is very difficult to change people consciousness to change people mentality. And such approach from state or from some organization like UK sport or England sport, does it help to implement good governance?
Well, sorry.
What do you think about it?
Yeah,
it's a good toolkit.
Yeah, I think I have not switched on my camera. I hope it will be okay with the internet. It's not an issue that you can solve within a day or a year. So we, from transparency, from the first moment on, when founded in 1993, I wasn't present there. I was not a member at Transparency there, but I heard of those who have founded Transparency. They said from the very beginning, it will take some time. It will take a long time, and it's about changing the culture. And that's not done by just having rules and by just having sanctions and laws in place, but to have discussions like this, to talk about an open culture, speak up culture, what I just did 5 or 8 minutes ago. And so it's very important that you see this as a long-time development, and there will always be problems and it will never stop. There is corruption already mentioned in the Bible, so it's a very old phenomenon, and there will always be corruption. So we will never erase it fully, but we can limit it. We can prevent it from growing like cancer. And step by step, we have to have more transparency. We have to have more awareness, more people talking about that's not what we want, that's not what we accept. And when I talked about the history of integrity, you can see there was a huge development within 30 years. Those who founded Transparency didn't expect some things to go so fast, and even in sport. Yeah, if you now look back, when there's a big scandal, the first big scandal in FIFA started in 2010 to 11 with the awarding of Russia and Qatar, the World Cups, and all the corruption allegations and really cases behind it. Up to then, I was already working for 5 years with Transparency International as a volunteer, and people said, well, we don't have much corruption in sports. That was, many said this. On others said, well, there is corruption, but you can't do anything about it. And it was so difficult to say, well, you should talk about it. You should make events on it, and say, oh, no, we don't need it. And then with the FIFA scandal, and that's something I'm grateful for to FIFA, yeah, for what happened in 2010 to 11. All of a sudden, it was on the international agenda, and everybody said, no, that's enough is enough. We have to start now. And then it was quite a dynamic development since then. FIFA now has 10 or 12 people in its compliance department, despite being quite a small company with 500 people or 550 altogether. And they have a compliance program, is sophisticated. They have started to educate the national federations. They have set new conditions for their funding they give to national federations. They have more controls and so on. And it's not so easy to have controls all over the world. And they said, well, we cannot pay more for controlling than we really spend on money for giving to the federation. So we have to have a balance. Yeah, so there are a lot of challenges, but step by step it will change. And what's important, we have once a year, Transparency International publishes the Corruption Perception Index. The next one will be in, I think, Monday, 29th. So it's not so long to go. And there we have a ranking of about 170 countries. We cannot rank every country because we don't have data from every country. It's a very scientific approach. I will not explain it to you how we come to the ranking. And but overall, a country in the last third of the ranking, you know, it's a very corrupt country. And a country at the top, and that's Singapore, the Scandinavian country, especially, I think Germany is about 12. Ukraine is not so good. I think you may know it. So if you look into that, and that's what I say when I'm talking to a German audience or to a Western European audience from a country where we have a low corruption rate overall, then you know that there are countries, about 50 or maybe even more in the world, where nearly everything is about corruption. And who will become president of a sport organization in a very corrupt country? Very often people who are more or less corrupt themselves. Fortunately, in every country, you have very wonderful, very ethical people. But in some countries, these people are in prison. Why? And the corrupt people are not in prison. Yeah? So that's what's happening in some countries. And so when you have the FIFA General Assembly, or from the swimming, from World Aquatics, or from World Athletics, and there are 180, 190 people, countries present. Some of the people there came into their position in a more or less corrupt way. You have to know that. And that makes it so difficult to transform an entire international sport organization. That's what I'm telling journalists again and again, yeah, who think, oh, just make a decision. We don't want to be corrupt any longer, and tomorrow everything is fine. No, it takes a long time. But it's worth to start and to talk about it. And it helps people, and it helps you if you see, oh, we are approaching. And Transparency International calls itself the Coalition Against Corruption. We are working together with everybody who wants to make a change. Even if there are still some problems in an organization. We have even had negotiations with Mr. Blatter and saying, if you really want to make a change, we will support you. We will help to have progress. Okay. So once again, keep in mind, that's what you need in sport, the overall structure of your sport organization, and then how to prevent misbehavior according to your risks. What kind of risks you have? Is the risk of doping in your organization bigger, or is the risk of manipulation of competition bigger? Yeah, what have you what specific risks you have? And if we look what we already talked about on sexual harassment and sexual abuse, there are sports where the risk is higher. In Germany, we know that, for example, swimming with young kids, there you have more cases of sexual harassment than you have in some other sports. Yeah? So that's depending on your risks, you have to intensify your prevention program. You have to have more controls and look into the right issues. So we're coming more or less now to the end. The key elements of good governance, once again, regulations and rules on specific things. That's conflict of interest, and I will go more into details that with the next slide. On advantages, for example, invitations, hospitality, or gifts. Yes, we have clear regulations in Germany now in sport, like we have it in compliance programs of companies, that you don't accept every present, every gift, because that can be a sign to that you can be influenced by someone from the outside to give a contract or whatever. And then to have regulations on sexual harassment and safeguarding. I think every sport organization should have it. And then you need transparency overall. You need the speak up culture. Remember the emperor's new clothes. You need someone where you can get advice. Yeah, that's very important, because if you start with a governance program, there are a lot of questions coming up. So when I have advised an organization, I tell them, okay, you can call me when anything arises that can help you in a specific situation. And don't forget that you need stakeholder involvement. Let your members, but as well others, have a say in your decision making. So what I want to talk about at the end now concretely is conflicts of interest. Do you know what this expression means? Have you heard of it? Tamus.
Of course, of course. I think there is different definitions of it, but in general, if mm, I think I remember I translated it once from the Cambridge Dictionary and the Oxford Dictionary.
Okay.
But it's general if you have you may be better you make your definition of it because
the best definition is their president of federation husband, the financial director is wife. It's a very good interest.
Yeah, that's a nice situation, isn't it? Yes. Yeah.
But I think it's if you have one position, you have two positions, and you use one position to benefit yourself on another position.
Yeah. So
that's one example.
Yeah, but it's all right. It's all fine. So the overall aim is to keep the decision-making process free from any undue influence or from the impression thereof, because also the impression can be a problem. If people think, just remember the case of Paul and the parents being sponsors. Yeah, if the other players have the impression he is only playing because his parents are sponsors, that's already bad. Even if maybe the coach has a specific strategic reason why Paul is playing all the time. Can be, depending on the next the next kind of match. So the usual situation is conflict between personal interest. I have to hire a new coach, and there are 30 people applying, and one of the persons applying is a friend of mine. I know him for 30 years, and we have been on holidays together and see one another quite often. Nobody knows, but then you cannot take the decision, and you even have to stay out of the body. If you're a member of a board, and the board has to decide about an important contract, and your husband or your wife is on the other side of the contractor, you disclose it and say, I will not discuss it with you. I will not take a decision. I leave the room. You take the decision without me involving, and I'm out of it. And you write it down in the minutes, and then everybody, even if this company is then chosen, but then you can say the person who was in conflict of interest wasn't a part of the decision making. It's very important to deal with this in the right way, and you have very often situations like that. Have a policy in place for that, make people aware of that, and avoid any mixing of interests.
You know, Sylvia, in Ukrainian sports, I mean, this is an old story, but after the fall of Soviet Union, when the first federations, independent NGO federations were created, they were actually created in many cases by state officials in the office next to them. They registered a sport federation. So you're employed by the ministry, and you also register an independent NGO that is not.
Yeah, that's not how it should be. I think in such a disruptive situation you had after 1990, yeah, with so much changing and transformation from really a very fundamental transformation. There will be situations where you, at least for some time, say, okay, better than nothing, have it like that the sport can start to grow and be developed. But with time going on, you should really transfer it into the right structures, into the right sort of organization, changing everything and coming to a situation where you can say, now we have reached the situation as it should be. and for nearly 2 years, you have some other concerns in your country than just thinking about the sport organization. So it takes more time now even. So, but if I can be of any support, give advice, you can always ask me, yeah? Beyond this one situation. I really want to support it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's already now my last slide, or I will only have a final thank you slide then. What's very important, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are already, that's a new instrument, how to have the overall good governance approach, but there are already a lot of information, guidelines, and so on, templates for rules on conflict of interest, rules on hospitality, and so on. And I sent Tamus, I don't know whether you have sent it to everybody, as I think you did, guidelines.
Yes.
We have developed in Germany that was just translated by a machine, and I made it then a little bit better than the machine did. So what I would like to do, and I'm just in discussions with the IOC and maybe with the International Floorball Federation, to translate as well the templates we have for rules on conflict of interest and so on. I can give you an example from an international federation. I can send it to you, Tamus, afterwards. They have adapted our German template in an international context, and they have it in English, so you can read it. You don't have to develop everything on your own new. Yeah, so there's a lot of advice on guidelines and so on from different sports offered, and so look for it and see what you can adapt and what adopt and what you can use in the Ukrainian environment. Then what's always important, if you start, then be serious about it. Walk the talk, not just say, oh, now we will do everything right, and then don't look into details and don't have the zero tolerance approach. Yeah? You have, when you start, you have to lead by example, and you have to really deal with every misbehavior. Otherwise, you will have no trust from your members and so on, that you really take it serious, that you really want to make a change. Better take your time, not do everything at once. That will not be possible, and tell people that some kind of expectation management, it will take time, but step by step we are trying to change, and don't start with just window dressing, making a big thing about it, and then don't really do it in detail. So that's, I think, what's most important. Start with the top, change the culture, and take your time. And so you just have to start. And I thank you very much for your attention, and happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting. I especially want to talk about more about implementation of this principle of good governance. It's very interesting for me how to change our Ukrainian leaders of organization, to how to help them to implement these principles in their organization activities.
Well, I can not tell you in detail how to do it in Ukraine. I tell you how I do it in Germany, and then you must see what would fit in Ukraine. So when a sport club, and I have advised bigger sport clubs, not first league football, yeah. So they have to take paid people and to develop a real specific compliance system. Yeah, Eintracht Frankfurt, Bayern Munich, they don't need me as a volunteer to help them. But clubs with about 3,000, 8,000, 10,000 members, with some staff members, but not so many, and with a volunteer board, elected people. So if I start a good governance process with them, I first talk to the leadership, those persons who want to do it. You always need 1, 2, 3 people who say, we want to do it. We will push, therefore. And then I look onto the statutes and see whether the statutes themselves are fit for purpose, or whether I see, oh, you should have some changes there. Then we start usually with a kick-off meeting where I have a presentation similar to this today, a little bit more shaped to the specific sport, to the specific sports club and its situation, but giving them the overall architecture, tell them about what do you need for a good football match, and look, that's what we are doing with governance. It's that they understand how to work on it. Then I give examples on the specific risk analysis. What sports do they have? If they have a swimming a department, then I say, okay, you have to do a lot on sexual harassment because there you have a big risk. If they have just members older than 60 years old, for example, a dancing club with only people 60 years old and elder, there can be a case of sexual harassment as well with people over 60. But you don't need a specific program to prevent it, because that's something else than having to talk about safeguarding for 6-year-old kids. So that's the approach. Talk about risk analysis, tell them a little bit what kind of regulations they need. For example, when I advised the German bobsleigh federation, then a question came up regarding, I don't know whether anybody of you knows a lot about bob and luge sport, but you have to deal with the technique of your luge or of the bob. And there you can make specific things that they are faster than others. And that's a big secret. And so you have to protect the secrets within your team, and that they don't tell others. So that's a rule. You don't need in track and field, because where I come from, 800 meters running, you don't have that. So we need they said, okay, we need a specific rule on that. And for example, in cycling, coaches need a lot of, how do you call it, that get broken quite easy. We put the air into it.
The wheel? The
tires.
wheel?
Yeah, the tires. Yeah, but
tires,
that, yeah, you need to change it quite often. And so they get 100 for their team. And then you take 10 of the 100 and sell it somewhere. Yeah, so that can happen. And that you have to prevent. So you need rules on how to make clear how many tires did you receive, who got it, and make clear that it's only was taken for the team and not for a special income of the coach. Yeah, so that's different from sport to sport or from club to club. So I look into that, and then they have to develop the specific rules. We have the templates in German. They can take it and adopt it, and then they need to educate their people. Then, for example, I make another presentation or even a workshop I did with the German Athletics Federation, and with in my region of Hessen with the regional gymnastics federation. I made workshops 3-4 hours with the employees or with the main staff members, telling them about the overall approach, having discussions in smaller groups, giving them example cases like we had in the very beginning. What would you do in a case like that with a coach and the parents as a sponsor, or with a case of sexual harassment and so on? So we have a broad collection of cases like that. where you don't have only yes or no as answer, but to think, what would you do with something when something like that would happen in your club or your organization? And then quite often you have very good discussions. And if I have an experienced person in the federation or in the club, they often already have their own examples and can say, oh, well, I make I give you some more cases we have experienced in our federation, and then you can have wonderful discussions, and people learn by discussing cases. Then they see, okay, what should they do? How should they behave? And what would be the best approach? And so step by step, you can change the situation. It takes 1 to 2 years for an organization usually, until really saying, well, we have it implemented.
Yeah, thank you.
Feel free to ask more questions to Sylvia. Можна теж українською сформулювати питання, я можу перекладати. Це не проблема. Okay, before people, if somebody has more questions, I have a question. Well, if we take our national federation, Ukrainian Floorball Federation, we have some documents in place. We have, I think, quite up-to-date statutes. We have some policy on to prevent illegal betting. We have competition regulations that includes many things, including fair play. But we don't really have a code of ethics or a good governance policy. And the tempting things to do is to take the one that IFF has, the International Federation. But the problem is that it could be very, far away from the people in our organization. So if we want to have a code of ethics and work with those issues, how would you recommend us to start? With what? Sylvia, are you here?
Yeah, code of ethics usually is quite a short document, 1 page, with just the values, so more or less headlines. Be transparent, don't discriminate, have objective decision making, things like that. And then you have rules, how to code of conduct and specific rules on specific issues. I will send you, and yes, you're right. What the IFF has doesn't fit for a national situation, and what a national situation has doesn't fit for a club. Principle, yes, but not in detail. So it depends on the size, on the overall structure, and so on. Yeah, we have templates. I think I can send you some best practices from. I have to search a little bit, but we have it in English on conflicts of interest and others, and then you have to see. And that's part of when I'm advising a federation that I say, okay, does this fit or does this not fit? Because if you have too many rules and too high level rules, then it doesn't help. Yeah, then everybody will be confused. So make it as simple as possible. Yeah, so what I want to do with floorball, but we are all doing it as volunteers, so that I still have a profession. I have 2 grandchildren. I'm a CAS arbitrator, so there's some work to do in other areas. But what I would like to do with floorball, or maybe we can have some more federations working together to develop templates for the national federations. And then say, okay, that's something you can have. But again, that will not be done within half a year. We are now just start. We want to make that's our first step. Something like I did now with you, with national floorball organizations to offer them maybe in March, April, May, we will see such a meeting, telling them what's about good governance, what do you need, and then step by step develop templates and other things that they can use.
Thomas, I think that our organization in Ukraine have a lot of different documents, a lot of different good documents which regulate activities. I think we have a good status. I think we have a good code of ethics or something like this. But the main problem for me, a lot of organizations don't follow these rules. It's the main problem. And how to make our organization follow these rules, I think it's the main problem which we need to resolve. What should we do? What should we do? Maybe, yeah, I agree. We can use soft power. We can use different seminars to talk a lot about this. Or, for example, we can use hard power, yeah? As like ministers who give money, it can require follow these rules if you want to receive state money, for example. So,
you know, Alexander and Sylvia, I wrestle with one problem, and this is maybe the most basic level. As I don't know, Alexander knows this. I don't know if Sylvia, if you know, but our federation, the Ukrainian Floorball Federation, is consisting of clubs. So we are one of few federations who are actually built on club membership, which I think is fantastic. I think in Ukraine it's only floorball and karate that is yeah. But the problem is also, for example, I know that many of our clubs they have a statute because you need to have a statute to get legally recognized. But very few organizations really look into their statute and follow their statute. We don't even talk about the code of ethics or some other documents. The basic main document of the organization statutes are very often, and I think in many federations also, are not followed. And I heard once a very good thing that, you know, you can have any kind of paper, even constitutions of a country, but if people are not willing to defend them, if people are not willing to live by them, then it's just a paper. And the difficult question is, how do you get more people to live by them and to understand the importance of, for example, in an organization following your statutes? Because actually many of our clubs, it's like they don't count members. So basically it's every time and then when old leadership is tired, they just call for an annual meeting and everybody who shows up at the meeting is a member. Yeah. I don't know if it's a precise question, but it's something I've thought a lot about. And I think this is also, it has to do a lot about the general level of civil society in the country, the education of people in society.
Yeah, you are right.
Yeah, that's right. In Germany, we have around 87,000 sports club, small ones and big ones, and 27 million members altogether. So we have a lot of sport clubs who are not as they should be regarding the statutes and everything. So still a lot of work in Germany to do, and of course I can understand a lot of work to do in Ukraine. So that must be clear, and don't expect too much, but again, that one can change it. And I have observed that if you start and be a little bit patient, and then one day there is more dynamic in it, and then you can make a big step. And so just continue and be patient. That's my overall advice to you. And what Alexander said, I think you need a combination of soft power and hard power. If you come just with sanctions, yeah, people will try to avoid it and so on, and you will not convince people. So set conditions from the government side. Start a little bit with zero tolerance, not from immediately kick all people out. That in the end, then no person are left. Yeah, that will not be helpful. But try step by step. Try to find allies. I'm sure that's my experience in every sport, in every organization, except for maybe the mafia, yeah? In an organization like mafia. But in every country, you have people who want to have it different. Just look for them, encourage them. You cannot change a sport club from the outside when you have only people there who are criminals. Just exaggerate a little bit. Then you will not be able from the outside to change them and make them holy people. That will not work. But I think you don't have clubs where you only have criminals. And so usually in every sport, in every country, in every company, you have people who just are quiet now, but would like to have it different, especially young people. And so encourage them. Make speeches from the government, from the NOC, say, we want to have a change. We can achieve it. We need some time. We will not kill everybody who is still doing wrong. Yeah, we will give everybody will, or nearly everybody will have a chance, but we want to have a change. And then maybe at the government or at the National Olympic Committee have a place, something like an ombudsperson or however you will call it, where people can call and say, in my club, something is going wrong. What shall I do? Can you help me? And then you know more about what's going wrong, and you then can develop ideas how to change it. And the people who are leading a club in a bad way, if they know, it can be reported to a place at the government or at the National Olympic Committee. That's a deterrent. Then they have to be more careful. Yeah, so that's another point how you can step by step change the situation. But don't expect to have it changed within a year. That will not happen. But encourage people, find young people, find allies, find best practices, and then if people see, oh, it's working, and they are successful with it, then others will follow, and then more people will be encouraged, and then there will be more knowledge, and then step by step the culture will change. And then sport maybe can even have an impact on the broader society. That can be a very important role of sport. Make athletes as role model. Let's say, make testimonials and say, we want fair play on the pitch, and we want fair play off the pitch. We want to be fair sportsmen and women, fair athletes, but the officials should be fair as well.
Thank you very much for your advice. Yeah, you're right.
Тамус, якщо хочеш, ми можемо об'єднати зусилля з хокеєм на траві і зробити щось подібне разом. Види спорту схожі, можемо спробувати. Я все одно зараз розробляю там концепцію розвитку, бо Європейська Федерація зараз це почала вимагати. Це один з розділів, який мені теж, в принципі, треба буде прописати, і можемо спробувати разом подумати з цим.
Згоден.
You said something on sports results, but I only got a little bit.
So he said that he's now working with the Field Hockey Federation, and he suggested that we together with them join our forces to yeah, to state those issues and think about it together. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they are also taking the practices from the European Field Hockey Federation about good governance and
So there are many international federations now working on it and having documents for their national federations. So I think you can find some, and I will try to bring some things together, and that will be helpful. I hope so.
Okay, if somebody has a last question, feel free. Otherwise, we will thank Sylvia for this amazing presentation and very inspiring talk. Any last question?
Maybe you know in your practice about appointment inside federation, responsible people, responsible person for this issue, who monitor, control the implementation of this principle. Some are like officer of good governance inside organization.
Yeah, it's good to have some on the board who is really someone who wants this, and whether it's the president or the vice president or whoever, or the secretary general who is behind it, and then but that's a little bit a different function, to have someone a little bit outside, not with an official function within the federation, as an ombudsperson, where people can go for advice. Because when I'm the president or the vice president, and maybe I have a conflict of interest as a lawyer. I cannot tell everybody what kind of client I have. Yeah? So that's protected as knowledge. I cannot disclose it. But then if I know there's we call it ethic advisor or good governance advisor or an ombudsperson I can go to, and the person will keep it secretly, and I can say, well, I have a client like this, and I think then I'm a conflict of interest. Shall I stay out of this decision? And then I can get advice. And so there are many questions in the beginning if you start with implementing a good governance concept, where you need someone who is not part of the daily work within a federation, because then you are part of conflicts. You're part of politics and so on. So something like an elder statesman, elder stateswoman would be good to have a lawyer or someone who has dealt a lot with HR, human resources in a company, something like that, because those people have a lot of experience with processes, with change management, and with governance issues. And then people can go there and have advice a little bit outside, not someone within the leading body.
And to be fair, the ethics committee of International Floorball Federation, you are outside of floorball. You you don't know. Yeah, you're not inside of our sport. So, but or maybe it's a little bit different ethics commission. But
yeah, it's in a big federation, it makes sense to have an overall ethics committee, but in the beginning to have at least one person a little bit outside of the sport or outside of daily work, independent from the management board or and the president and so on, to give advice.
Yeah. Okay. I think we are done. Thank you very much, Sylvia. Thank you everybody who joined today. We have recorded this. I will send it to you, Sylvia. Maybe if you don't mind, put it up in our media, for example, the Federation media. Or we can decide what to do with it.
Yeah. So the Secretary General of the Floorball Federation is interested in seeing it, and we want to discuss it in our ethics committee, whether this can be a way how we approach the webinar we want to make with the national floorball organizations, and also discussed it with someone from the IOC, because I think one could do more like that, and not just me. We need some more people doing it, because I can only do it from time to time. But thank you all for joining, and I'm learning from every presentation I make. And if there are, approach me, and I try my best to answer your questions and to support you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, is some materials on this theme about good government materials, books, some rules maybe? Do you have some materials which can be read and to give other members of our clubs?
Yeah, I will put some material together and send it to Tamus, and he can then send it to you. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Take some time. I will probably not do it tomorrow, but within the next 2 weeks. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, and take care. All the best to you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.